I love to talk about these three guys. Mr. Stress, Mr. Ego, and Mr. Autopilot. You will read about them in the book, and if you choose to read the book. And these three guys, speaking of what stands in the way for this longest journey, nothing messes us up as much as being stressed out. Stressed out people are awful to hang around. It's terrible to have a stressed out boss. And if you have workers who are stressed out or co-workers who are stressed out, they're not going to make any good decisions. They're not going to be effective. And frankly, most of all, they're not going to be pleasant to be around. And we sort of have to be around them a lot of the time. And so this day for you is to take what resonates with you and make a commitment to your own excellence of self. And I can guarantee you that if you don't get Mr. Stress in order, and what I mean with that is that you need to befriend him in a way where you can recognize, oh, there are times when Mr. Stress is super good because he can come in here and he can help me overcome this peril. He can help me in this difficult situation. There is a time, especially when you're being chased by big wolves, where Mr. Stress is really good. What we have done, though, is that we have built a life where we don't respect Mr. Stress in a way where we need to rest. We need to recover after we've had a stress-induced episode. So of course you can work hysterically for a deadline and work till 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not a problem. The problem is if you get up at 5:30 the next day and start as if everything is as usual. So here you need to find a relationship to how you take care of yourself, and you can feel it, right? When you get this stress-induced chemical cocktail that just dumps in your system, you're like, oh, wow. You can actually feel the chemical compounds changing your system. It's terrific, very, very rarely. Most of the time, and any long-term stress is detrimental to the system because the same chemicals that helps you temporarily to be a bionic woman or man, the same chemicals will break your system down. And what happens when we go to the doctor, 75% of doctor visits in the United States are directly related to stress. 75%. It's the most common reason for sick leave in Sweden. It's a huge problem to not know the mechanics and to have a relationship with Mr. Stress within. Mr. Ego. Oh, Mr. Ego. I mean, the reason I can teach Mr. Ego so well is that I still have and have always had a huge ego. And I know how wonderful it is to get older. I know how wonderful it is to actually create a relationship and awareness that there are drives in me that has nothing to do with my true self, but that really are a product of Mr. Ego. Mr. Ego is the one, together with Mr. Stress, who says, you have to do more, you have to prove those bastards, you can't stop. And these guys never think that anything you do is enough. You are never enough. You cannot satisfy these guys. And that's the whole idea. It's the whole idea. That's why we need tools to get out of our head, because that's really where they live. These guys are phenomenally skilled at taking over your brain. So we need to know, to what degree do we engage Mr. Ego? I might need him a little bit today. But we also need to become aware where we say no, where we say that's enough. We can't do that unless we know the other part in ourselves, the true self, the one that doesn't need to prove him or herself, that doesn't need to compete, that actually recognizes that there is an interconnectedness and that your well-being is my priority. And this is when we start switching. My most important switch ever in the history of me is to go from deserving to serving. I actually thought that because I was a CEO, that I deserved stuff. I deserved certain kind of treatment. I deserve certain kind of, if it's at the airport, if it's at work, whatever it is. And I'm really important, so my family better buckle up because I am special. And thank God I woke up from that nightmare. It is a nightmare because it keeps me separated from others. It keeps me not interconnected. So Mr. Ego is, I could do a whole day on Mr. Ego. And we will have the chance at the end of the day. We have a whole hour set for questions that may not occur to you right away, things that make sense or not make sense as we go through the day. So if things come up, you can interrupt me at any time, still. Mr. Autopilot, as I mentioned, we are astonishingly not with it in our lives. We are operating in a way where we actually aren't aware of what we're doing while we're doing it. And that is most of our existence. There are good times for the autopilot. In a car, there's a certain amount of autopilot that needs to be there in order for us to drive well. If the autopilot takes over too much, even in a car, you're going to be in an accident really soon. And it's the same thing with life, that there's a certain kind of autopilot that just helps us. These guys never stop. Until you say stop, these guys won't stop. Their job is to take as much space in you as possible. So it's not their fault. We can't blame them. It's just that we need to become smarter than their intentions for taking over us. Does this make sense?